I want to preface this by saying my story is really all of your stories as well. It's all of our stories. Mine had some particular incidents, particulars that are part of me, but you all have the same thing, and I'll explain that a little bit later. My story started actually with a picture. Excuse me. I don't know if you can see this or not. You probably can't, but it was about the best I could come up with. This very handsome individual was me, minus a few years and a few pounds ago. And it was a picture that appeared on the, I think it was the 8th page of the Courier Journal in August of 1982. Standing behind me, or not standing behind me, but behind me, was a sign that said First National Bank and I think Kentucky Trust Company. This was an organization that I was in the process of suing. I was trying to get my job back. They had forced me to retire because I was openly gay. Not that I was gay, but that I was openly gay and was going to be openly gay. I had been with them 2 months shy of 20 years. I started out as a runner. When I left, I was a vice president and manager of the 5th largest bank that we had at that time. So, I was standing there literally shaking. I thought they were going to come out with a butterfly net and put it right over my head and drag me back to the bowels of the bank, and I was never going to be heard from again. That didn't happen, obviously. I'm here. But I was following an intuition. I was following something that was larger than me, something that I needed to do. And I found this meditation several years later that I'm just going to quote part of it to you. But it's from Thomas Merton, Thoughts in Solitude. And it's basically, my Lord God, I have no idea where I'm going. I cannot see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will lead. And then further on, he says, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. And that was what I had to go on. That's the way I felt. I really didn't know what the next step was going to be. Go back to my childhood, because we don't ever get to point C without going through B first. So I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. I went to the public schools here. This was in the 1950s, the early part of that decade. There was nothing out of the ordinary of my 7-year-old and 8-year-old playmates walking to and from school, which would have been 8 or 10 blocks away. We didn't think anything about it. Our doors were unlocked at home. We never locked them. We had electric lines running down Frankfort Avenue, because that's what the buses ran on. So it was a very different time. By the end of the decade, the guys had ducktails, I think that's what they called them. And I never had one, it wasn't my style. And the girls were wearing poodle skirts, and it was, here again, very, very different. Growing up, I didn't have a lot of friends. The friends that I did have were primarily girls. And as it got to the end of the decade, I was in high school. I needed a date for the senior prom. And so I asked this girl that I had known since I was 3 years old. She was safe. And I could ask her, we went to the same church together, and I could ask her if she would go with me, and she said yes. And this started a relationship where, I'm going to say we dated, but we didn't date in the sense of romantically dated. We hung out together, basically, is what it amounted to. We did that. We broke up. We got back together. We broke up. And then finally, being the coward that I am, there was a chance that I was going to be drafted. And at that point, if you were married, you didn't have to get drafted. So I got back with her again and asked her to marry me, thinking that she was going to do this right away, which she didn't do. She wanted to wait. So we waited over a year. In the meantime, I joined the reserves and spent 6 years with the Army Reserves, so I ultimately did not get drafted. But we got married. And I think my only comment that I can say about that, if I had known on the morning of the 12th, which was the day we got married, what I knew on the morning of the 13th, it wouldn't have happened. I'm a strong proponent of premarital sex. We married in 1965. We were ultimately married for 2.5 years. The best part of that was my daughter, who is now 50 years old, and she's a captain in the United States Navy, which I'm very proud of her. But my ex-wife and I split up in the middle of December, and 2 weeks later, I met someone at a gay bar downtown. I went with this individual, and I'd been with a couple of guys before, but not a lot. They were really one-night stands. I was really sort of a slut. And but anyway, we got through that period. And 2 weeks later, this guy and I moved in together. It was an emotionally disastrous relationship. If the straight marriage had been physically disastrous, this was emotionally disastrous. We stayed together for 13 years. And in the middle of that period, we split up. After 3 months, we got back together. And after we got back together, he and I took a vacation trip to Chicago. And I was reading some gay rag somewhere up there, and I saw 2 words which grabbed my attention. One was gay, and the other was Episcopalian. The Episcopal Church had always been my safe place. That was my safe place growing up. I was involved in the youth group. As I said, that's where my future wife, that's where I met her. It was a place I felt comfortable. And the 2 words were connected with an organization called Integrity. And Integrity was an organization, I want to say under the umbrella of the Episcopal Church, if you will, that was supportive of gay and lesbian individuals. I have nothing against bisexuals or transgenders, but at that time, they were so far out of the radar, we weren't even thinking about it. That just wasn't there. I went to this Eucharist, and there was this wonderful priest there who was celebrating. If you could envision statues that you've seen of Benjamin Franklin, sort of the bald head and the long hair coming down and glasses on the end of his nose. And this guy was wearing sandals. And he said something that I've never forgotten, which was, you no longer have to be in the cesspool of damnation. And that might as well have been an arrow that shot at me. I never forgot it. I don't have to look at the quote. I know exactly what it was. I knew that I wanted that same kind of support that I found in that room, that same kind of love and acceptance here in Louisville. So I came back to Louisville and met with a few Episcopalians. There were not enough Episcopalians to go around. There were very few, and there were even less clergy that were supportive. So we joined with the Roman Catholics, and we formed an organization called Dignity and Integrity, and that lasted for about 8 years. And I think it was very successful in the fact that it did bring awareness to gay and lesbian individuals within the religious community. It also fostered other support groups in other denominations as well. My partner at the time, who, as I said, it was an emotionally disastrous relationship, he was scared to death somebody was going to find out he was gay. Now, as I think back on it, why wouldn't you think something was going on if you were living with a man for 13.5 years and you went everywhere with him? You know, you're more than just buddies. But this was to the extent that he even wouldn't let me plant pansies in the front yard. We had no pansies. The other thing that I was aware of, and I found this quote later from a book written by Malcolm Boyd, who was an Episcopal priest who happened to be gay. He wrote a book in the early 1990s called Take Off the Mask. And his quote in that book was, "A mask is a lie. It obscures deep truths. It gets in the way of life." And that hit me. That's where I was. My masks of trying to live, and I won't say I wasn't living in the closet, but I also wasn't extremely open at that point. It was getting in the way of my life. That needed to change. Subsequently, my partner and I separated, and life went on. It was also at that time that I told my boss at the bank. This was a gentleman that I had worked with for, I'm going to say, 17 and a half years out of the 20 years I was with the bank. Great guy. I really liked him. I enjoyed being around him. I wanted to share my good news with him. What I didn't take into account was the fact that he was a Roman Catholic, but not just a Roman Catholic, he was a conservative Roman Catholic. And he couldn't handle the fact that I could be Christian and I could be talking about a Christian organization and be a homosexual. So he went down to the bosses at the main office, and they called me in a couple of days later and told me that I served as a vice president at the pleasure of the board, and that if I was going to be a gay and open homosexual, that would not be at their pleasure, and I would either need to resign or they would try to find something for me in the bank. Well, here again, talking about going into the bowels of the bank, I could just envision where that was going to end up. That was not an option, nor was I going to give up the process or the activism that I was engaged in the community. My only option was to resign. That began a period of 4 years of meeting with lawyers, depositions, court hearings. We had the first trial before the 5th District Court. We lost that. We filed an appeal to the 6th Circuit Court. And if you remember the whole marriage issue, the 6th Circuit Court is not known for its liberalism by any means. Well, it wasn't then either. And so we lost there, or we won there in the initial battle, which surprised us. The bank then came back and wanted the case to be heard en banc, which meant the entire court was going to have to hear it. We knew we'd lose there, and we ultimately ended up settling. So we lost the legal battle in one sense, but we gained in the battle, I think, of public opinion, public awareness. The outgrowth of that was a fairness organization, a fairness ordinance here in Louisville, which we certainly didn't have before. There were more and more groups that formed supporting LGBT individuals. So in that sense, we won. And I think that's the way I had to look at it. To the extent, we won to the extent that I now am a member of an Episcopal parish where our priest is gay. He has, and he's very open about it. He married his husband just this past year, and when that was announced to the congregation, everybody laughed. They clapped. Not didn't laugh, they clapped. We wished him well. So they are very, very open and accepted by the community. Here again, that wouldn't have happened when this court case came about in the early 80s. The other thing, and this is going back to the article, the picture, the other thing that occurred was the paper was seen by a gentleman, a school teacher in southern Indiana, and it made an impression on him. He told me, and I didn't know this for 25 years, he told me later that I was the first normal homosexual he'd seen. Well, I didn't debate that, but okay, I'll let him live with that. Everyone else he'd seen, they were stereotypes. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but they were just all stereotypes. That was what was in the public eye. I was the normal one. Subsequently, he got involved in the community. He has been in relationships for, I think, 2 or 3, for many years though. Very positive relationships, and he's had a very positive effect on the community. The thing that I wanted to say, and this gets back to what I said at the beginning, how this affects all of us, this picture affects all of us, was I had no idea that what I did by having my picture on the front page or the page of the Courier was going to affect this individual in Southern Indiana. I'm sure his attitude was transmitted to his students as well, a positive attitude about how he felt about himself. I'm sure the priest in Chicago who said we are no longer going to have to live in the cesspool of damnation had no idea how that was going to affect one scared little gay guy sitting in that congregation. But it had a tremendous effect. So, the point being that all of us and all of you, we don't know how our actions and what we say, how they're going to affect other people. And many times, they will affect other people far more than we can ever imagine. Thank you.